rapid heartbeat, headaches, nausea, feeling like you're just going to jump out of your skin, feeling like you're going crazy, feeling super worried, feeling like there's just impending doom right around the corner. Well, if that sounds like you, well, that is anxiety. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Understanding anxiety, why anxiety itself is not always a bad thing, and why you'd never want to outrun it, and why you want to let it run its course. Let's talk about it. Check it out. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Positivity Experience. It is your girl, Lori, and I am so excited to be here with you today. If, in fact, you do celebrate the Christmas holiday, this is coming out on Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas. If you do not celebrate it, that is okay. Happy Sunday. And this topic is really important to me because it's something that I've dealt with all my natural born life. And it's been a really high requested thing in the Patreon. And over at Patreon, I'm going to have a really good worksheet for you. And I'm really excited about that. And so if you do struggle with anxiety, and Patreon is just a complimentary, it complements this podcast and goes a little deeper and provides a worksheet for you. And going into 2024, might be some video, some fun little things and benefits to that. So if that is your jam, jump over to the Positivity Experience, which you can find on patreon.com/the Positivity Experience, or you can just click the link anywhere that you're getting this podcast right now. But I really want to talk to you honestly about my experience with it. And in my upcoming book, you're going to see a lot more than just what we're going to talk about here. But I've had a severe anxiety disorder all my life. The very first panic attack, anxiety attack that I ever had was when I was 4 years old. I did not know that it was an anxiety attack. It wasn't like I was like, I'm having anxiety. But I can tell you exactly, I can't remember 3 days ago, but I can tell you exactly what this felt like. And it's important that I share it with you. I can remember being 3 or 4 actually. And I was laying on my couch and my face was facing the pillows. So my back was like towards the outside of the couch. And I was looking at the palm of my hand right now. Of course, let me also preface this by saying I'm also intuitive. I've talked to dead people since I was a small child. My daughter sees global tragedy before it happens. Like, the intuitiveness runs in the family. Typically, if you have an intuitive ability, you also carry a high level of anxiety, just a side note. But so I know that I was experiencing something that I don't remember experiencing. So I was looking at my lifelines. You know how you see your lifelines on your palms? Like if you ever seen somebody say, I'm going to a palm read or anything, that's what it is. And I can remember looking at my palms at 4. So keep that in mind. And I was like, what did I feel like before I came here? Very bizarre thought, right? What did I feel like before I came here? And I'm 4. So my frontal cortex isn't formed. I'm obviously experiencing something from previous somewhere. And it does, I couldn't figure it out. And I kept thinking, I don't know. I don't remember how I felt. For whatever reason, that created such an enormous amount of anxiety. Of course, I didn't know that it was anxiety. All of a sudden, I'm breathing real deep, but I don't feel like I'm getting that relief breath. Okay, so I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. You know, if you stretch and you yawn, you go, and you can almost feel this big sense of relief. Well, when you're dealing with anxiety, at least for myself, I could never get that deep breath. So then you feel like you're not breathing. And again, 4 years old, you can't naturally rationalize it. But then I was afraid to say something to somebody. Oh, it was just really bizarre. So it was kind of like the first time that I can remember. It did just run its course, right? But I didn't know, I was afraid, but I didn't know to be afraid. It was really weird. So fast forward throughout most of my life, on top of the intuitiveness, on top of ADHD, on top of severe trauma from molestation, to my mom passing, to my brother and sister being serious addicts, my brother trying to pull a gun on my dad, my sister trying to run us over in a car, before I was a certain age, right? Well before 14. So there was a lot of life things that would create this sense of anxiety, right? I didn't know what I was coming into. If my dad wasn't fully drunk and he was just a little drunk, then it was going to be good, but then it would change and you weren't sure how to respond to it. There was a lot that came with it. So after my mom passed, and after we lived in a van, but then I lived with a friend, so I could actually shower and still go to school for a short period of time. And then I screwed that up because I went out, got drunk at 14, because it's what you do when you have no coping skills. then my dad and I ended up being in the hood, right? You guys know that grew up in the hood. And I can remember, I really enjoyed sort of like what let's call it the street life. And it was the excitement of it. It was the excitement of standing on the corner at 7-Eleven with the people slinging drugs or anything like that, and doing so. And that was good, but it was problematic when I would come home and go to bed or try to go to sleep. And I remember one of the first nights, so I'm laying in bed. I'm like, okay, I think it was school the next day, like ninth grade, 10th grade. No, it was ninth grade. And I'm laying in bed and I'm almost asleep. And all of a sudden my heart goes off to the races. I'm talking about, I felt like it was coming out of my chest. It was going so, like, it didn't make sense to me. And my dad was out like at the bar or something. And so I have nobody around me. It's not like we have cell phones, by the way. Okay. And we might have had a landline at that time, but it was like, all my thing was, I'm going to run to 7-Eleven where my like drug dealing friends were. But I knew that there were also police that sort of hung out at 7-Eleven. I know it's weird, but that's how it was in the 80s. So they didn't always bust people. So I knew my police friends were there. And I literally felt like death. Like I didn't know how to feel. I couldn't swallow. That tends to be my anxiety go-to. I can't swallow. I can't take a deep breath. Rapid heartbeat, palpitations, those are kind of like my general jams. And I'll talk to you about what yours may be. And I remember going to there, they asked, oh, where's my dad? Because of course my dad was kind of known, and they were really nice because they would drive him home from the bar sometimes, but most of the time he would drive drunk, but they would drive him home from the bar. And so they took me to the hospital because I was like, I need to go to the hospital. Like, this is death. This is bad. And so they took me to the hospital. By the time I got to the hospital, they're like, okay. And then I think somehow or another I think my police friend got in touch with my dad. My dad came to the hospital. And so it seemed like it started to dissipate a little bit at the hospital, and they gave me a Xanax. And probably about 30 minutes later, I was like, okay, well, this isn't, okay, that's not bad. Okay, I feel a little bit better. Like I felt exhausted. If anybody on here has ever had an anxiety attack or has severe anxiety, after you go through the anxiety moment, it's literally like you got hit by a brick. You're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Because think about this, your adrenals are responding. Your fight or flight mechanism is there. Your cortisol levels, all of these stressor responses are there. So you just literally in your brain survived this really traumatic, scary thing like running from bears so they don't eat you, but your brain doesn't know the difference, right? So this became a twice weekly thing, 2 to 3 times where I would just go to the hospital. Right? It's not like I was in psychiatry at that point. Yeah, just go to the hospital. Because it wasn't like I just went there so I could get Xanax, because I never was addicted to Xanax. When I was actually petrified of medication for a while, because my brother and sister were severe addicts. Like mostly my brother was into heroin, hash at the time. My sister would take any pill that she could find. Like she found a pill, she didn't care what it was, she'd take it. So like there was a lot of things that kind of came into play. I have an addiction background with my dad, like all these things. So you kind of go down this spiral scariness of, well, what if I take this medicine and what if it's bad? And you do all of these things, which by the way is all anxiety. This led me into the profession that I do today. And it led me there not on purpose. It led me there because when I was and I went in and out of different psychiatry and different therapy, and they had me on beta blocker. God, I've tried every medicine. They've had me on beta blockers. And I'm on a good mood stabilizer called Lamictal. I love that one. It's not to prevent life, right? Like you still have to experience life. You still have to experience emotions. But, I've been on it all. And until I started studying human development, and I was like, well, I really want to know why. And this was my OCD being very helpful. And that's why I call it my superpower. Even my ADHD is a superpower. But it became helpful because I was obsessively, not in a negative obsessively, I needed to know why my brain does what it does. I didn't need to stop it. So this is the helpful part. I didn't need to stop it. I needed to understand it. Well, when I went to a psychiatrist, he was from the Philippines. And I remember sitting with him and I was pretty much like, okay, I'm crazy. Like I am crazy. Like this is before I had my son, but not long before. So in my early 20s. And yet, no, I did have my son because this was part of my postpartum, and saw a doctor, and he had his Buddhism books on the shelf, just on the shelf for himself, not like we're in public shelf, like on his back shelf. And I remember talking to him and I told him, I said, I don't know. I don't feel like a human. I don't feel normal. I feel like my entire life is nothing but fear. I'm worried all the time. And, after that session, we were there, it was about 90 minutes. And, he really took a liking to me. And he could see I wanted to feel better, but I didn't necessarily want it to just go away. I wanted to understand it. So this is my first key for you, is stop trying to make things go away. You got to understand it so you can appreciate what's happening in your body. Scary, not scary, doesn't matter. It does make a difference. And I remember him saying to me towards the end, he said, this is going to be a good profession for you. And I just kind of thought, what? Like I'm crazy. What the hell are you talking about? Like I barely know how to form sentences. You're telling me this is going to be, and he's like, you're going to be really good at it, because based on everything in your backstory, and the more you understand it, the more knowledge and the more education that you get, if you're going to develop anything within your human behavioral type studies, this is going to help you. But the schooling itself or the education itself is really irrelevant. Now, this is what he says to me. He's an absolute great doctor. And I was like, okay. I was like, what do you mean? He said, because what you have experienced is what we call life lessons. And you have a PhD in life lessons, right? So he made me laugh. And then I remember saying, hey, what's that on your book? Like, I'm curious, and he knew I went through a lot of religious trauma within the Baptist religion. Southern Baptist religion was very, very stressful for me, which also caused a whole separate level of anxiety for many years. And he said, oh, it's what I practice. It's Tibetan Buddhism. So there's different types of Buddhism. I was like, oh, I said, what is that about? Because I'm curious, right? I will ask you questions because I want knowledge. I want to be the dumbest person in the room, in any room I walk into, so I can absorb all of the knowledge and education from other people. Unless, of course, you hire me to speak. Well, then I better know what the hell I'm talking about, right? And so he said, here, do you want to borrow the book until next week? I'm like, sure. And so I started reading it and I was like, And so I had more questions. So he linked me up with people who could really help me, who weren't even in this country. So I had to have like a translator and all that stuff. But, and then I also with people in the country. And so I learned a lot more about Buddhism and staying present. And so then I started my mindfulness, meditation, manifestation kind of training for the last 17 years, which is what I've been doing for my personal life. And learning to stay present, learning to accept that there's things that you cannot run, like death and worry and fear about that. It's not productive. So this is over a period of time, right? It's not like you're not going to get this in a podcast and be like, oh, great, I feel better. But you will have the understanding. But I wanted to give you about a 15-minute background so you can understand that when I'm talking about it, it's not just from some weird educational place where I've like read 6 books and this is what I'm telling you. No, I've lived it and I continue to live it daily, but it doesn't rear its ugly head nearly as much. And when it comes, I know to let it come. You should not ever fight anxiety. I know. I told you I was going to the hospital. I would run. All I want to do is flee life. I understand why you do it. I'm telling you, it's never going to be effective. And I will tell you this, and this is something that took me a long time to understand. And I went tooth and nail with professors, with scientists, with psychologists. Like suddenly they know nothing, because that's what you do when you have anxiety. Nobody knows anything because you feel it worse than anybody else on the planet has, which is always funny. And I remember Paul saying to me, I know this is the worst anxiety you've ever had. You tell me this every time. And we start laughing. But I would say to them, because they would say, listen, you have to let it come and it'll run its course in about 90 seconds to 3 minutes. And I was like, no, like suddenly now I know. Because mind you, all I've done is experience. They're like, yes, that's how the anxiety cycle works. What happens? I was like, no, that's not true. I'm literally arguing with them. That's not true. I've had it for weeks. I've had it for months. They're like, of course you have. I was like, explain. Because you just told me 90 seconds. I just told you I've had it for a month. You agreed. He said, yeah, because you keep fighting it. I was like, okay. And so over a period of time, by the way, many, many years, that's why clients stay with me for years. I still have somebody I talk to for years. You're not just going to outrun things. There's no fast fixes. You got to stop with going, I just want this to go away. No, you have to sit with it. So let's talk about why, or not why, we'll talk about that too. Where these symptoms can come, we'll talk about where they come from too, but what kind of symptoms you will have. Palpitations, rapid heartbeat and palpitations. You have to understand when you have, and it can be, by the way, and this is an experience, something that I've done too, is you could be in some weird relaxed state, which is rare. But let's say you're like, there's nothing super to be stressed about, even though your brain is like, hey girl, time to be stressed about nothing. But you're sitting, say at a beach, or you're sitting somewhere and you're chilling and you actually feel okay. And then all of a sudden you can't swallow. You can't take the deep breath. And you're like, oh, why am I having this? There must be something medically wrong with me. No, you haven't processed your anxiety. If you fought it and you keep trying to put it in a corner and you keep trying to put it in a corner, and then your body goes into like, when your body goes, oh my God, I can relax. And then your anxiety goes, yeah, good. Now I have center stage. So don't think that automatically something's wrong with you because you've been in a good state and then all of a sudden this anxiety hits you. It's not coming out of nowhere. It feels like it's coming out of nowhere. It is not. It is something that you have not dealt with. And you can't keep outrunning it. You can't. And here is a big one. And this in my early 20s took me a hot minute. This is where your ego is going to come into play and where radical acceptance is going to come into play. Just because you have anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, anything, it is a reason that things might be more difficult, might be harder for you, might be more challenging. It is never an excuse. You cannot expect the people around you to cater to you, to coddle you, to basically kiss your ass, walk on eggshells when you're having an anxiety day. Just because you have anxiety does not mean the world stops and that the people in your house have to be on guard. This is a bitter pill to swallow. It's one that took me a really long time to swallow. When you check your ego, when you do all of those things, it's going to be very, very helpful. So like I said, the rapid heartbeat, you guys know I have palpitations on a regular basis. I see a cardiologist for many, many years. This has always been a thing of mine. Yes, it's scary. Yes, you can feel it. Most people do have PVCs and PACs, which is that palpitation, but not a lot of people, not a lot. Some people like myself can feel them usually all day long. And so it can be scary. You're talking about your heart, right? That your heart, your brain, two like main places, but both are screwed up. You're like, yay, right? And so what you have to remember is it is not abnormal. It is a hormonal for what we call your adrenals, right? And it is your stress response. And so when you have your stress hormones and when your adrenals go into high gear, it can increase heart rate. All right. When it increases heart rate, it is actually helping. Now it's not helping you, but it's why it's there from a beginning of human reason is because it's preparing your body for actually real threats. Right. So it seems bad, but it's not bad, but it feels bad because you're not really, so it's again, chicken and the egg. Shortness of breath is the one that I just told you about. That was a really big one of mine. You are breathing. I promise you. And I'll give you some tools. We're going to really talk about the tools on Patreon, to be honest with you, or this podcast is going to be 75 hours and you'll get a lot of those tools in my book too. And the book, it will be audible. Somebody asked me that. Yes. So that'll be helpful and there'll be a little workbook kind of thing with it. But it's important that you understand that even though you feel like you're not breathing, you are breathing. The problem you have is that you focus on your breathing. Oh my God, I'm not breathing. Oh my God, why can't I? Okay, stop. You're breathing. This is where mindfulness, I'm not asking you to suddenly practice a Buddhist practice. If that's something you want me to talk about on here, do reach out to me on my socials. Do comment on any of my this also goes to YouTube. Comment over there if you want me to talk about it. I'm more than welcome to. It is not a religion. It's a spiritual practice because no, I'm not a religious person. I'm very spiritual. And so, which has very much helped me, by the way, side note. It's kind of saved my life in multiple cases. And what you have to remember is when you're in that breathing place, as you're going, I can't breathe, stop. You're breathing. I promise you, you're breathing. You sit. Okay, I know you're stressing. I know you're freaking out. I know your brain can have 900 tools, can listen to 900 podcasts, can read 900 self-help books, and it all goes out the window because you go into fight or flight, right? So you have to, I am safe. Okay, I do a lot of tapping. Right? I do a lot of EFT tapping, which is emotional freedom tapping. It just comes with part of my practice. And I always go sort of where your third eye is. And I just tap lightly. I mean, I do other places too, but I just go, I am safe. Don't let your brain lie to you and be like, well, what if you're not? Shut the fuck up. I'm safe. Okay. Now we're going to talk about there could be medical issues too, right? So if in fact you find that you're having these rapid heart rates or you're having palpitations, by all means do reach out to a cardiologist. Don't just poo-poo it away either. It could be something, but it could also not be something, right? So if you're going to do the what if game, like, oh my God, this is negative, you got to what if it from the positive too. You guys know that. If not, you'll never rewire or reframe your brain. It's just not going to happen. So the shortness of breath, I understand, can be very, very scary. It can feel like you're breathless. It can feel like you're hyperventilating. This is why you want to just, as much as you can, even though you're in that like, I'm going crazy mode, I am safe. You got to take a deep breath. Don't try to force the deep breath and don't go, well, I'm still not feeling good. That's all part of your mental stressor of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, but it's really your fight and flight here. Muscle tension is a big one. I want you to do this right now, no matter where you're listening to this. I want you to just take your jaw and I want you to like, meanwhile, y'all can't see what I'm doing. I want you to open your mouth like you're going to yawn, and I want you to move your jaw from side to side. This is, you are relaxing that. Very often you have what we call shoulder earrings in any kind of like coaching practice or mental health practice. No, you're not always walking around with your shoulders up in your ears. But right now, consciously go drop my shoulders. Very often you're going to feel yourself drop them a little bit because you have this muscle tension, because all day long you're carrying the stress, you're not processing it. This is why my 5 journals is also life-saving in many, many ways. It was for me. So go to my YouTube really quick, like when you're done, and watch the 5 journal series. And what I am going to be doing in 2024, kind of important for you to understand, is every month I'm going to have a theme on my YouTube. So there's going to be about 14 to 15 episodes for whatever that is going to be, and I have it planned out, but whatever that topic is, so we can go really deep in things like this, the anxiety, amygdala, what does it do? It's going to seem a little nerdy. It's going to seem not pretty. It's going to seem not fun. But if you don't have the education, you're just looking for the solution. But when you have the education of why your brain and body does what it does, you're able to accept it and then go, oh, okay, so there is a solution. I'm not the only one. And I promise you this, you will feel like you are the only person on the planet who has the anxiety feelings as bad as you do. And every time you get one, you are going to tell yourself it's worse than the time before. This is a normal process. It's not true, but it is a normal process. I promise you've been there, done that. Okay, so that's your muscle tension. So that's why you want to do a lot of in the morning. You kind of been a shallow breather in the morning. I mean, throughout the night, you might, if you've slept at all, you go, okay. So you always want to stretch out your body. You want to tense each muscle. You want to like kind of roll your ankles a little bit, like, take a couple of deep breaths. Okay. This is just a good way to activate your body, right? It's very, very important. Restlessness. Now that can also be confused with ADHD. So a lot of times BTW, anxiety and ADHD can go pretty close together. I'm not saying that it's a comorbidity. It can be though. Okay. But the restlessness and the feeling on edge, you know how you ever just feel like I'm going to jump out of my skin, and you could literally be in a great setting. You're like, oh my God, it's just coming out of my skin. Okay. That's all part of your anxiety. Okay. Again, it's high adrenals. Just because you're not feeling that high level of anxiety in that moment does not mean it's not in your body. And yet it's always going to be in your body because it's part of human anatomy. It's part of our instinctual ability. You want to have some anxiety. Some anxiety is great. Like I was just in Universal with my daughter and, getting on a new roller coaster, you get a little bit of that, okay, that's good anxiety. You're never going to get rid of anxiety itself. It is part of the human makeup. Okay, so accept that and understand that it is not all bad. Anxiety is not all bad. So when you also accept that, then you don't villainize it, right? But your body goes into a heightened state of alertness because what's happening is it's these adrenals that still haven't processed. So you're kind of like, oh my God, I can't, which kind of goes very much into the next one, which is like difficulty in concentrating and staying in one place, right? And, anxiety can shift your focus, right, to perceive threats. So it's hard sometimes to like concentrate on a task because now you have these racing thoughts, you have these worries. And so you're worried about so much about yesterday, you're too worried about tomorrow, like all of these things. And then you're like, oh my God, I got to pay these bills. What the hell am I going to do about oh my God. So this is all like, these are all life things, but you worrying about things that you cannot control will never help you. And knowing what you can control is going to help you, but stop trying to control it today. I need to get this done. I need to get that done. And I wanted to do this specifically before we went into the new year because everybody has these big plans. Everybody has these big goals. I'm going to lose all this weight. I'm going to save all this money. I'm going to stop doing all this online shopping. And I'm going to get back into my practice and I'm going to meditate. Oh my God, calm down. Pump your brakes. Do not set your 2024 or any year that you're listening to this up for you to feel like you're not accomplishing anything. Stop doing that because it's a baby stepped process. Stop rushing this. Stop thinking that you got to lose the 20 pounds this week, or this year even. Stop thinking that you've got to like do all of these things, get a better job, get out of this relationship. Stop doing all of these. You got 12 months, calm down. And you're going to create anxiety and you're going to create something. And now you're restless. Now you can't concentrate. Now you feel like you're behind everybody else. Now you feel like the comparison itself is a nightmare. Okay. And now you're restless. You can't get, okay. Now that can also be ADHD. So you want to talk to your doctor. And listen, I get so annoyed. Seriously, I do get a little annoyed. I don't let it bother me. But when everybody's like, oh my God, suddenly everybody's ADHD. Yeah, a lot of people are. And a lot of us were. I also have ADHD. Yay, me. Can't hit the lottery, but if you have a mental illness, your girl wins. And so what you have to remember is you want to also look at any type of medical things, right? Don't panic about it. I know I have a whole thing. I just told you I'm going to be doing series on YouTube. I have a whole series on health anxiety. Yes, baby. So make sure if you get an opportunity to go over to my YouTube, it's still the same, The Positivity Experience, or you can just hit @Lori Wheeler, you'll find me. But it might be really good for you because there's going to be a lot of free resources there as well. And don't forget, you can always book something like individually with me online, like you guys know that. But I want you to know that because a lot of times you're setting yourself up for it. And then you're saying, well, something's wrong with me. I can't sit still. Well, maybe you do have the ADHD. Maybe hey, there is help out there. And knowing, I want to go back to the education piece of that, knowing what is going on. Stop trying to avoid a diagnosis, but don't get married to it. Again, reason, not an excuse. So I want to go back to what I said before. Just because you have anxiety, you have depression, you have bipolar, you have ADHD, anything. It is a reason, but it is not an excuse for you not to try. It is not a thing for you to just be like, well, this is what I am. This is what I have. Now you marry yourself to a diagnosis. A diagnosis is strictly a medical way to know how to treat somebody. You are not your diagnosis. You need to know this. Stop marrying yourself. Say, I am this. No, I am having anxiety. I am in a depressive episode. Not I'm depressed. I'm anxiety. I'm bipolar. No, you're not bipolar. You have this chemical and a wiring that's just a little off. That's it. Let's not marry yourselves to all of these things. That's going to create more anxiety for you. That's right. Okay, irritability. That's a very common one, right? Because you don't know, because a lot of times with your anxiety, it's almost like you go into emotional dysregulation. You don't really understand what is going on. You are irritable. You are on edge because you still have these stress hormones racing through your body, right? So there's nowhere that they're going. And now, it's your body's heightened state, again, of arousal can make you very sensitive to stimuli, right? So maybe somebody's driving too slow. So what? Excuse me. Maybe somebody's driving too slow. Maybe it's taking them too long. Maybe things aren't going as fast as you want them to do. So now you're irritable. That's yours to process. That's why emotional regulation comes into play. Understanding mindfulness, being in the present space. If medication is needed, take your medicine. Stop going, you guys know I studied holistic practicing. Like I know how to prescribe holistically, but I also know pharmacology because you can't prescribe holistically without knowing some pharmacology. Because if you give the wrong thing natural with something that somebody's taken from a pharmaceutical perspective, that can be very deadly and bad. So you got to know. And I'm going to tell you right now, stop going, I don't want to take medicine for the rest of my life. That's also your anxiety. Why not? If I'm not saying that you have to, because luckily, I'm only down to my, Lamictal right now, but good Lord, I've been on it all. Well, the mindfulness helped a lot of that, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be on something for the rest of my life. So the more that you're stressing about taking your medication, the harder that it is going to be for you to get through things because now you're too worried about, well, what if I have side effects? Okay. So how's that anxiety working for you? Okay. Everything comes with risks. Everything. comes with risks. Too much water, not enough water. Too much sugar, maybe not enough electrolytes from the sugar at times. Like there's a lot. So if you're going to play that game, you're going to stay emotionally paralyzed. You're not going to do anything. Insomnia, sleep disturbances. This is common. You lay down to bed, you know that you're exhausted. You're like, okay, oh my God, I got to get some sleep. And then your brain goes, hey, what you doing? Do you remember in second grade when that girl said that? Remember how that made you feel? And you're like, why am I thinking about this right now? I just want to go to sleep. Then you do that dumb thing. I got to go to bed. I got to go to bed. I got to get sleep. Got to get sleep, guys. That's not going to help. Again, I'll have a whole thing on sleep too. But insomnia, sleep disturbances, this is a very common symptom. Okay. Headaches, believe it or not. Digestive issues, diarrhea, constipation, stomach issues. Sometimes that can lead to things, but all of that. And that digestive issue or the headache or the can't be able to breathe leads to excessive worry. Excessive worry is a common diagnosis tool used by doctors, used by psychiatrists, used by all of that. If you're excessively worrying, well, then guess what's going to happen? It's going to create more anxiety. So you're worrying about, it is literally like the foundation. Like if you're like, what is the foundation? Worry. Worry. And then everything builds on worry, right? It is the hallmark area. It is the foundation of it. And your mind goes into hyper focus on potential threats, right? That are, it's that they are unlikely, could things happen? Let's talk about that. Could they? Yep. Could you go to the mall right now and get shot? You could. Could the headache be something? It could. It also could not. You could also go to the mall and be fine. So this is why the remapping, the reformatting of the brain, that's why things like, brain mapping is great. I do it, I kind of help rewire your brain a little bit and give you different strategies and structures. But you worrying about, it's not going to make sense to you until you can really accept this. This is Radical Acceptance 101. Things that have happened in the past, that time is dead and gone. It will never return. Your brain and how we exist as human beings from the past, when we think of the past, is strictly from memory. That time itself, though, is gone, right? We can read history books about, George Washington. Okay, he's gone. He's dead. Yeah, we still have the effects, say lasting effects of those things. That time's not coming back, though. You could change things now as best as you can. That's not going to change. So beating yourself up, worrying about things, it's a wasted time. And then you get on the thing because then you go into control. Control's fake. You have no control over anything but your mindset. Or you're worrying about the future. And what's going to happen then isn't happening right now. And you can't control it when it is. You're not going to be here forever. And if you're constantly worried about, well, what's going to happen? And what if this? And what if that? If you're constantly worried about those things, you're not living now. You're not living at all. You're just in mere existence. And I'll give you tools and all of that. Now, where does all of this start and where does this come from? And why does it happen? Well, we know that genetics is a big part of it, right? So I'm not saying that it is everything. And that's the important factor too, right? Is that what you have to understand is with genetics, right? It is considered to be a certain component. So my mom, I was destined to have anxiety, right? My dad was severely bipolar, even though he was released from the military in the 40s, World War II, right? He was born in 1922. So whatever, I think that was two. For schizophrenia. It was not schizophrenia. They didn't know much about that then, but he had an honorable discharge for, I'm telling you, it was bipolar. Like we know. My mom had severe panic disorder. Her thing was passing out. At the moment there was arguing in the house because I'm the only child between my mom and my dad. So my mom's daughter and son, who have since passed, they would be in their 70s because I was born to older parents, 44, 49. And my mom would always pass out. That was always her thing. When she wasn't passing out, she was having anxiety. Everything was death. She was dying. Now, granted, she did die. She had she had cancer, she had leukemia, she had diabetes. She did not have diabetes. I'm lying to you. She had blood transfusions. My sister had diabetes. She had all of these things, skin cancers that ate away into her brain. So she did have real stuff. But prior to that, and prior to me being born, my sister said, my mom also had a crazy first husband and a crazy second husband. So, you know what I mean? And her phobia was always death. Everything was dying. And she did die. for 7 minutes one time, and she went into the light. She said it was crystal. It was bluebirds. It was very warm. She heard a voice saying it wasn't time, go back. Again, I come from intuitive families. And if anybody has ever said to you, I'm intuitive, or I see dead people, or like, like myself, you're going to carry anxiety. It is the yin to the yang. Nobody just does that and has no anxiety. No, it's not because you're afraid of it. It's not because you're trying to stop it. It's just how that works. I don't know why. I haven't figured that out yet, but it is what it is. But genetics can play a big part of it. So I don't know if you've ever, like when you go to the doctor and they say, okay, what's your family history? And you have to say, like, has your family had this, 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 and this? I'm always check. And then you go to the middle side and it's like, check. So I was going to win some level of a mental health lottery. That's right. Don't be jealous. Brain chemistry, your neurotransmitters. Sometimes you're just wired differently. Why? I don't know. But what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and keep complaining about it? What's wrong with me? Why can't I be normal? There's no normal unless you're a dryer. If you're a dryer or you're a washing machine, yes, there is a normal setting. Yes, you can be normal. But that's all that's going to be, right? Your life and trauma. Your life and trauma can create a big piece of this. Huge piece of this. That's mine came from genetics. Mine came from definitely instability in life, a lot of trauma that was really not needed. All of that, your mental health can really decline on that. And I would not change my past. And I think some people are like, what? Because number one, I can't. So sure, if I had a magic wand and you could rewind time and you were Superman, sure. But the reality is you can't. And if I didn't go through those experiences, I wouldn't be doing this podcast. I'm very good at my job. Okay. I'm very good at my job. I never thought I would be when I was in my 20s. I'm very good at my job, and I'm very good because I accept myself. I love the fact that I have been a survivor. I still have those remnants, I've had anxiety disorder, like I just told you, since I was born, basically. And it's not, I mean, it's well under control, but no, every now and again she comes in, I'm like, oh, there you are, boo. I name her. Her name's Rita. I name my anxiety. She has her own identity. And I know when Rita comes to play, I'm like, oh, then Rita wants to be heard. So a lot of that's my inner child. And then I have to talk to Rita and be like, okay, wait, what are we worried? Well, that's out of your control. Rita goes, but I don't want it to be out of my control. And I go, but it is. So sometimes you have to separate yourself. You have to pull yourself back from a 10,000 sort of level of a view that's going to help. Now, you also have to understand that let me tell you where anxiety comes from in the brain. This is going to be a little nerdy, but it's one of my favorite things to talk about because I needed to know the education and I need to be able to share it with you. So your prefrontal cortex, you hear people talk about that. Like if I just took off your forehead. So we're talking about your prefrontal cortex, which is where, like I have a teenager, she's almost 17. And I remember when my son, who's almost 28, was like doing things. And I think, what is wrong with you? Like, that's dumb. And it's your prefrontal cortex. You make stupid decisions, right? You make dumb decisions. And I don't know if you've ever seen, or if you ever remember being a teenager, but there's a certain level of narcissism that comes with that. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It just means that your prefrontal cortex. Now, what does your prefrontal cortex do? Well, what it does is it's like ventromedial, right? And it is involved with any kind of regulation or inhibition of emotional responses. So this is where emotional dysregulation is and where emotional regulation is, right? And that also is where fear comes from. That's where anxiety comes from. And it helps to actually, that part of your brain, prefrontal, helps to actually assess the relevance and context of a situation. So it provides more of a nuance and a natural, rational response. So if it's dysregulated, if it's wired weird, if it's damaged from trauma, it's not doing its job. It's doing its job, but it's doing it in a very skewed way. Like it's lying. You know what I mean? There's an illusional response. The hippocampus. I don't know if you've ever heard. Think of a hippo, like hungry hippo. Oh my God, I just totally dated myself. No, tell me you're 50 without telling me you're 53. And what that does is that involves any kind of memory, formation, and retrieval. Okay, so that plays a big, big role in contextualizing and interpreting situations, right? So just think about that. You're contextualizing, you're interpreting. How you interpret a situation is how you're going to receive the situation. Hear that. How you interpret a situation is how you're going to see it. It's how you're going to respond to it. Have you ever heard of perception? So if I go to a museum and you go to a museum and I think this is the best painting I've ever seen, I'm crying because I'm so emotionally involved with it. And you look at it and you think, the hell is that? I could do that. And I'm like, oh my God, it's the best painting ever. Well, I'm perceiving it different than you. Maybe I've had a different experience. Maybe these colors mean something amazing to me. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. Doesn't mean you're wrong. But that's what I'm saying. Your hippocampus is doing that. So if you have a dysfunction, if there's some dysfunction in there, it's going to create this exaggerated fear response. So again, it's a dysfunction. There are ways of helping you through it. This is why you can't resist the fact that, and you don't have to be a mental, quote unquote, mess to seek counseling, to seek coaching, to seek therapy. No. Everybody in the world should have it, and you should have it for the rest of your life. Right? Some people take insurance, some people do not. It's about what you're willing to invest in. Like I say that to all the time. I have different tiers as far as like payment structures, and I have different programs, and I'm even more into 2024 because I know that I'm good at my job and I know that you can get something out of it and you can learn. Well, if you go, well, it's expensive or I don't want to do that, you don't have to. But then you have to say, yeah, and this is, of course, if you have the money, and then if not, there are people who take insurance. I'm not one, but there are people who take insurance. There are people who take state insurance. Yes, it's there, but you have to do it, and you have to do it long term. Long term. Did you hear that? Long term. But if you don't, you can't do this all on your own. We all try that. I'm going to read 9 books. I'm going to listen to 12 podcasts and I'm going to do it myself. You're not, because you'll only carry yourself as far as you will. And if you have a dysfunction in your hippocampus, you're going to be like, well, I don't know. And now your prefrontal is not, dysregulation's everywhere. Now you've had all of these things come into play. Okay. Your neurotransmitter system. Okay. Those are because I could go into each part, and I will in a YouTube if you're ever interested, because it will be out. Your neurotransmitters, okay, serotonin, gamma, which is like your GABA. I don't know if you've ever heard of GABA, neuroepinephrine. They all play a role in your anxiety. So any imbalance in this is why serotonin. So think SSRIs, Zoloft, Paxil, Prozac. That it helps regulate that out. Everything comes with, possible side effects, but for the most part, you've got to say, do I want to live this way for the rest of my life? And no, a magic pill is not the solution. No, magic therapy is not a solution. No, deep breathing is not a solution. These are all parts of your toolbox. Okay. Your amygdala. Hello, amygdala. Let's call that your lizard brain, right? That's called your survival brain, right? But that's part of human anatomy, right? Your amygdala. So think of it as like an almond. You ever see an almond? Well, of course you've seen, a lot of people see an almond. So it's it's almond shape, and it's deep within your brain, right? It's not just sitting there hey, it's deep inside your brain. And that is what processes emotions. That's right. That's how you process your emotions, not run from them, but it processes emotions, especially fear, right? So again, education. Stop trying to make things go away. Stop trying to make it just stop. If you don't understand what's going on in your brain, if you don't understand what's going on in your body, you're always going to seek answers that you're never going to find. You got to know, because if you know and you go, okay, well, what if they're all screwed up? Well, they might be. Well, there's ways of helping you. Yes, mindfulness. Yes, meditations. Scientifically proven over and over again, meditation. No, you're not going to meditate and take an ashwagandha and be fine. No. There's so much more. You got to process your back shit. I don't want to deal with it. Well, then you're going to stay in where you are. Well, look at me. I can't believe I did that. I'm terrible. I'm a piece of shit. And why did I? Okay. Oh my God. Beating yourself up is not the answer either. You did what you did. You said what you said. You're here today. Okay. So if you are in this space of feeling like your stomach's bothering you, sometimes I get tingly. I don't mean it's hard to explain it. Maybe somebody understands this listening, but you almost feel like you can't feel your hands. You disassociate, you dysregulate. That's a survival response. Disassociation, dysregulation is a survival response. Again, stop labeling it as bad. It is what it is. Oh, okay. So if you're, you don't have to walk around town going, well, my hippocampus is crazy. Like, it's just part of the brain. Oh, my prefrontal cortex is fucked. Like, you know what I mean? But it's important that you understand what goes on in your mind, and that these symptoms is just, there's a book called The Body Keeps a Score. And it's true. Like a lot of time, it's like, what comes first, right? The chicken and the egg. What comes first, physical or mental response? It can be either. You could be thinking about nothing in your physicality that you haven't processed it. So I'm going to jump over to Patreon. We're going to talk about some strategies on what to do when that happens. But I really hope that you guys understand that there's nothing wrong with you. Now, are there medical things? Sure. That's why you want to go to the doctor. By the way, people do not die from anxiety attacks. It is not life-threatening. It feels life-threatening. Now, you want to get it under control. You don't want to keep raising your heart rate and having your adrenals go all day long. No, that can eventually lead to something. But as much as you feel like death is on your door when you're having an anxiety attack, and I promise you, it is a shitty feeling. And no one will ever understand it unless they go through it. But it's not for them to. Reason, not excuse. So just because you feel like you're on death's door because you're having an anxiety attack, the world does not have to kiss your ass. Okay? A very important one. I lived it. I have experienced it. I have thought somebody should be like, you got to stop doing that, because it's going to lead to so many other issues. And then you're on this cycle. So I hope that was helpful. Please jump over to my YouTube. You can even watch this. It's just me talking to you. Do consider subscribing to the YouTube, just because in this next year and going forward, they're going to be mostly series that are really hopefully going to help you, just to give you a good starting point. And then if you ever want to do something private, you can always get me. I love you guys. I hope that your end of December is beautiful. I will talk to you one more time before the end of the year. I love you guys, but know that what you're experiencing, you're not crazy. I promise you're not crazy. Do not try to outrun your anxiety. Deal with your shit. Sit with it. Understand it. And know that this is, I'm going to live with this forever, but it doesn't control me. It doesn't take me over. I kind of walk hand in hand with her. Again, I've named her Rita, considering naming him. Because sometimes your anxiety is trying to tell you something that you keep trying to avoid, but then you're neglecting your inner child and the inner self just as much as everybody else did. So are you any better? You know what I mean? So love you guys. Have an amazing, amazing day. Check it out.